Welcome to everyone to our webinar on Elderwealth INSITE. Really pleased for those that are hopefully joining us live, and anyone who's listening to this recording or watching it later on, welcome. Over the last few weeks, we have discussed quite readily on Insight Chat about what we're doing around Elderwealth INSITE, and we're using this as an opportunity to meet the team behind what we do, also discuss what the program looks like and how it works. I'm joined by Lisa Goff. Lisa is our operations manager for Quality Insight. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Brad.
We'll get you talking early so that you're in the mode of it. We'll also be joined by Paul shortly. He will be jumping on as we go through this. Really, we are here today to talk about what Elderwealth INSITE does, but more importantly, how does it help complement the additional services and the programs that actually make up additional services. Additional services in residential aged care is not a new item, nor is it a groundbreaking thing in the industry, but it is definitely going through significant change right now, and that's namely driven by market pressures. But more importantly, it's been driven by the powers that be to really make sure that residents are not ripped off, that residents are getting what they're paying for. And there's a couple of mechanisms that have been sorted out around that. So the real definition about additional services is they must be items that are significantly better than what's on offer through care and services. To define that quite specifically and what's on offer, it can be quite subjective. So if you look at something like food, basic daily fee covers off food for residents in aged care. It also covers off utilities, some consumables of care, housekeeping and general upkeep, but there is a food portion of that there. If the provider counts food as part of their additional service program under the regulation and the advice given by the Commission, they must be able to prove that this food is above and beyond what would normally be on offer. And they also must be able to prove what the spending, that the spending is actually significantly more. So when you take food as that example, it can be reasonably problematic, and that's what comes to how we look at this program and how we build it. There's two pillars that have got to be looked at when we look at an additional service program, and that's access and derived benefit. But we'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, also, Brad, just to add on to that, what constitutes to part of an AS program or an additional services program, there absolutely has to be full transparency. So if you think back to the original agreement, when you've got a resident that's taking on entry to the home, there needs to be that full transparency around what an additional services program is, what it covers, and what items are applicable to that person going into care. So those items then need to, in turn, be itemised on the bill. So each month when the residents receive their accounts, they need to have those line-by-line items listed so that it's, clear and transparent for those involved. So that's a very important thing to make sure that is happening across the board, and it is something that is quite hit and miss at the moment as it stands. We also need to make sure that the resident is receiving benefit from the items that are on that additional services program and package. So it's really up to the provider to make sure that that they've delivered the service, that the service is applicable to the person, and that it is being reviewed so that package is always applicable and transparent for the families and residents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like we were talking about before. It's about the systems and processes that support that mechanism moving forward. And just when you thought enough was enough, the services and product, as we said before, they need to meet these gateways of access and derived benefit. The interesting thing over both those mechanisms is they can be subjective in one sense, but if you look at something like access, that's pretty clear cut and black and white. The access has to be that the resident can physically or take advantage of that program day in, day out. And an example of that is if you've got hair services as an additional service program, but you have no hairdresser for the month, they've been denied access, and that actually should be removed from the billing for the month as a credit or a potential make good. But in a hair service, hair only goes so quickly, so I don't think you're making that up. Derived benefit is a little bit more subjective. Again, bring it back to simple terms. The resident's got to be able to derive benefit. And as Lisa said before, if there's no benefit to the resident, why should they be charged for that? So again, we're using food as an example here. If the resident's on a fluid diet and been charged for a daily hot breakfast, can they really derive benefit from that hot breakfast? Now, there is some arguments around that. We've worked in aged care for a while. We sort of hear both sides of the story, but you got to bring it back to the basic pub test, and it will suggest that there needs to be more effort in understanding what is the derived benefit for that purpose, for that particular program, and that leads us into what is Elderwealth INSITE. Really, it's got to be. We look at this program as one of those things that absolutely ticks off the ledger when it comes to access and derived benefit, and we believe this really delivers on that. All residents entering a care home can access the program, so it doesn't matter if a resident entering has capacity issues. The family members can absolutely take full advantage of this program. A resident who enters into care and has full capacity absolutely can gain benefit from this program and has access through. There's also derived benefit for those residents, not only of means, but also for those that are under the concessional ratios. And we'll talk through what that looks like. But most low means residents that come into care that are a couple separated by illness, etc., have the potential to require this service. If we go through to the basics of the program, so it's firstly EWI, or Elderwealth INSITE, is a service that explains further to the incoming resident and resident representatives of what the fees and charges are about and what potentially their individual circumstances or position can be. It's not there to replace what an admissions team would do. It's there to support and complement it. And we all know that those first couple of days of someone entering care, the days prior and the days after entry, can be quite confusing and stressful, and people forget. The mechanisms of the program is really there to support and back up that. So the consultants through Elderwealth INSITE will make contact with the resident or resident representative that's nominated, and they will start talking through what the program is about and how it pertains to them individually. And that does constitute a little bit of information sharing about personal situation, which from then they can explain the fees and charges again if someone's not quite sure. So it gives you a bit of a backup. It's also there to establish what has been updated or what is getting updated to Services Australia. And that can be quite important, particularly when trying to establish the means of a resident coming into care. They may have come in with an interim setting of a high means resident, and through discovery, it could be worked out that this person is a moderate means resident and partially supported, and that can adjust the billing required by the home and the finance team, billing teams in more particular.
I think it's really important, Brad, just to add on to that. There is an assessment piece that takes place as part of the Elderwealth INSITE process. So if at that point it is determined that that program will not benefit the resident or their situation, then that's where we would notify the provider so that an appropriate solution could be seen in an additional service.
Yeah, and that's correct. I mean, it's a cornerstone of how we've built our INSITE Care Plus model or additional service model. For those that aren't aware of our program, that's the cornerstone of it, is to make sure that people get those safety nets. Providers have the safety net, the residents have the safety net, because we understand how this program works. Furthermore, to that initial call, what residents can expect is the resident or resident representative will also enjoy access to regular updates and webinars. So there's newsletters that come out at a regular basis. There's webinars that will take place. Through those mediums, there's tips, resources, and tools to improve financial understanding and ultimately maximize entitlements. There's also offered a hotline for any of those urgent needs. We use accredited aged care financial advisors. This isn't just set up with a couple of people who know a little bit about aged care and finance. Our business partner, Paul Murphy, has an aged care financial background. We've always advocated the fact that aged care financial planners are a must in this industry. They understand the legislation. They get the regular updates. We're in an area where fees and charges can change twice or even not 4 times a year. Things happen quickly, and you need to be up to date with those things. So we rely heavily on that, and that's who we use to support this program. In terms of what the charge is to the resident and what they can expect, Lisa, what could a provider expect with all these services?
Yeah, so Brad, good question. With additional services, they're generally mapped out to residents as a daily rate. So we've done the same thing when it comes to calculating how Elderwealth INSITE should be charged out. So we've worked out that care home providers should charge around about $7 to $10 for Elderwealth INSITE, and that's obviously the daily fee. Our charge, regardless of the amount of residents that go into that home, it's currently sitting at $5.50 plus GST. So there's a significant amount of margin on that for the home and for the provider, depending on their daily rate charges. But yeah, absolutely, that's the price that we're indicating with at the moment.
Yeah, and great value for the resident too, right? So yes, the home has got some margin on there, but there's a couple of different access points that are covered off. So in most cases, the provider would have a contact person at the home. There's information upon entry that needs to be collected for the Elderwealth INSITE program to kick off, because ultimately you need to understand who the EPOA is or person responsible to have those discussions. We have a quality insight team that backs that up and acts as a gateway around the derived benefit piece with the vendor that we use to actually complete the services. That EWI support line is something that shouldn't be dismissed easily either. That's that access point for that resident's family member to ask those pertinent questions takes a huge amount of pressure off the billing teams for providers. So there's some great derived benefit from that over any time and over the course of the program. We see that to be such a huge benefit. We also, so when we look at that interaction we have with the resident and resident representative, within the program, you must be able to show full transparency and update that derived benefit piece and have that collection of notes. So our Elderwealth INSITE team will always report back post a conversation and give feedback as to how that went for any updating of notes that the care home needs to do. They'll also outline to contact people in billing, whoever else, the contact person, where they see some risk or potential error that needs to be addressed quite quickly. So providers should see this program as another safety net to ensuring residents are billed correctly and within their means structure. Residents can feel safe that there are no misnomers about what the billing and charges are. So it's a really nice way of making sure we've got full transparency. When it comes to the care homes, I mean, they can expect full transparency in this program. They'll see that early identification of financial risk, as we said. An example of that could be that the resident coming into care could be initially viewed as a partially supported resident or a moderate means resident. And now through discovery, it's been determined through the Elderwealth INSITE program that they're going to be a high means resident. There's means tested care fee implications that follow through with that, which ultimately ends in bill shock because they get a DAP or a RAD payment that could be thrown on top of that as well, which would be different from the DAC. So there's a couple of different things that they again could be arrested and saved from misinformation. That early questioning of our team discovers the situations they're very experienced how they do that discovery piece. It's not just a call center person asking some pointed scripted questions. It goes through the process of discovery. They've done it 100 times. They know what questions to ask the residents. So if anyone is putting forward misinformation or mistruths about their financial position, it can be discovered quite quickly. And I'm not suggesting that everyone is out there trying to shade where they're at from a financial sense. No one wants to have to pay more than they have to. but they also don't want to be lumped with a huge bill later on. So we can really troubleshoot and explain what happens. Hopefully we've discussed the process from end to end, and given a reasonably clear explanation of where we're at.
Yeah, Brad, I think if we want to just move forwards a little bit, just to talk about what the actual process involves. So if I've got a person that's entering care, what do the steps look like as far as signing up to this program and how it will be delivered? So as a resident enters care, they're identified to the Elderwealth team just by a simple application form. That form's pretty basic. It's a standard form that covers off most of the things that you would already be providing at the time of entry to care. Things like your EPOA will be outlined just so that we can establish who it is that we're dealing with and that we've got a contact point. So our team will then, upon receiving those forms, contact the EPOA within the first 10 days from the day of admission. From that call, basically we are dealing with the nominated person to talk about the process for updating Services Australia. There's up to 2 submissions a year that can take place as well for the maximum benefit to the resident. So residents and their representatives, as Brad has just said, can also attend webinars that we've got set up throughout the year. So they're on a quarterly basis, and there will be monthly newsletters that go out as well, so that we can keep everyone up to date, as we all know, with all of the changes that happen financially around the industry. So it's all about keeping people informed and delivering the right information back to them, as well as maximising their potential benefits that are on offer for them. So given that there's changes several times a year, as I've previously said, it's really important that we're giving them as much information as possible, but then in turn that relieves some of that pressure off the staff in the care home, because they're not getting so many inquiries with regards to billing and fees and things like that, because the residents and their families are already informed.
Yeah, correct. And I think that information piece is just so vital in this industry, and a key measure that the department wanted to see more transparency in these services. A question that gets raised a little bit is this only a high means resident service? I did explain earlier on that no, there is a Elderwealth INSITE Lite service which caters to residents of low means. You will have some residents that come into care that absolutely cannot afford anything more than the basic daily fee and their medication. They would not be on this program. In fact, they would probably come through our gateway and be quickly turned around that there is no derived benefit for this person. For a low means level of person, we're more looking at those people that have come in as a couple, separated due to illness to come into care. Hubby or wife is at home under a protected asset. They've been able to come into the care home as a supported resident or a low means resident. They would benefit from this program because the partner sitting at home would have full access to the webinars, they'd have full access to the newsletters. And if and when they needed to come into care, they would obviously then switch over to the Elderwealth INSITE program. Or if something happened and that person did not come into care, but the resident inherited those assets, they would be able to benefit then from the program fully, with all their entitlements potentially intact from the start. It also covers off what we like to call bill shock, where that someone coming into care, they've had their asset under protection for 2 years, they're deemed a low means resident. All of a sudden that house is now accessible, means tested care fees gone through the roof, pension has been disappeared altogether, didn't get any advice on how to fix that, and now they're in a situation where they're under high stress, and it's not a time to be under high stress after being in a care home for a couple of years. So we see that as a real upside for those people. Lisa, from a training point of view, it's all well and good for us to say, look here, come on, put Elderwealth INSITE into your care home, but there needs to be some training that happens around this, doesn't there?
Oh, that absolutely does, Brad. I think one of the key things is having the teams that are selling this program onto their resident cohort. They need to be really clear on what actually it is, and really understand the benefit to the resident, because there is a significant benefit to that resident and their family. And as we've said before, it is ongoing throughout their stay, regardless of their capacity. So we conduct training and group sessions on how the service works. We're more than happy to work with providers that need assistance in marketing it to their residents as